If you'd have told me, I was expecting to be his perpetuation at Branch on Wheel, and would eventually have bought out that agency. If you'd have told me even in 2016 that any of this would have happened, I wouldn't have believed you.
We would love to have you tell us about your career and just all of the other fields that you've sort of worked in, and bring us from like beginning up to present day.
Absolutely. So I went to college and graduated in 2004 with a youth ministry degree. Now, while I was at school, I did almost finished a minor in CIS, which is Computer Information Systems.
Yeah.
I was building computers for our office, and when I was in high school, we built computers and sold them to friends and family, and built all the work ones in the insurance office at Bradshaw and Wheel, which my dad worked at and my first cousin owned. And
Okay.
so then in college, man, I was always buying and selling computer stuff. It was ridiculous. Surprised my wife didn't beat me to death when we got married when we were in college, and so we had no money whatsoever. But I was buying and selling stuff on eBay.
Yeah.
So I ended up had almost finished the CIS minor. Was not a programmer, which you really need to do if you're going to do that. And then also I really loved accounting, so I was a double major Bible with a youth ministry minor in accounting, and the minor for youth ministry became a major. And because of the hours requirements for accounting, I was going to have to go a fifth year to get the 15 hours done on accounting. So I ended up getting out with a youth ministry minor, but I almost finished a couple other things that I've really used a ton since, especially the accounting side. So I had no idea I was had numbers, like numbers, like math, until we got into accounting class, and then the OCD part of my personality came out, which I didn't know was there. So I guess I was a late bloomer for college for multiple reasons, but so we did that, and then graduated, did youth ministry for about 6 months before getting a call from my dad, and he said, "Hey, your first cousin's thinking about selling the business to a bank.
Okay.
If you're really serious about moving back," which my wife and I were high school sweethearts, and we are both from the same town, and had always said we'll do ministry for a little while and then move back. And so we were like, well, I guess we're gonna go ahead and move back. So we decided to move back sooner than planned, and move back to work in the business. And I went from like being a minister, knowing that whatever I did every day, I got out of bed and was doing what God wanted me to do, to being an
Yeah.
insurance agent and trying to sell. I was doing a financial planning. I was trying to sell old ladies annuities,
Okay.
and was really not very successful at that.
Okay.
So my dad the whole time, my first cousin's a financial planner, and he was like, "You need to do what I'm doing." And my dad the whole time was like, "You ought to do property and casualty insurance. That's been great for me." And so we finally, after a couple of years, I got my license in that, and just wanted to write church insurance because had a couple of them call me, even though I wasn't really doing that, and didn't have a good company for it. And I talked to my dad about it, and he's like, "No, Church Mutual is too good. I wouldn't even try to compete with them." And I didn't listen to him, and we ended up going through some sales training and connecting to Brotherhood Mutual, who's a competitor of Church Mutual, and somehow managed to get them to appoint us, which they're really, I had no idea what I was doing. I just talked my way through it, and had no clue whatsoever. And the guy that appointed us taught me how to sell, and I would not
Okay.
be here if I hadn't encountered Matthew Green in that part of my career. So then we went through the process of building workflow, and my computer background, and our complete lack of workflow, which honestly was a blessing, because I was like, man, I'm having to hack my way through everything, and
Sure.
there's got to be an easier way to do this. So as I did something, I'd be like, okay, next time we teach somebody, we're going to do it this way. And we just kind of started building workflow as we went. And building computers, it prepared me for that in many ways. So
Oh.
so started building workflow, and then we had a good enough company that we could repeat it, and then ended up in bounced along and did okay in the business until about 2011, and really then started focusing on churches, and ended up hiring a second guy to work churches, and we just blew it up at that point. Wrote a bunch of churches, started consistently producing high volume of churches and writing new business on churches and growing, and then that led to 2016. We separated our church book of business, into a separate agency, which
Okay.
eventually became Lightwell Insurance Advisors.
Um,
And then in 2018, the kind of that the separation of the churches started a timeline where it made sense for us to continue to separation, just because we did things very differently from my first cousin, who's primarily home and auto oriented and
Okay.
financial planning, and a little bit of a conflicted agency owner. Honestly, he really just wanted to do financial planning, but had the agency, and so he had to make sure it was doing well. So we ended up buying our commercial books customers from my first cousin, not the church. The church was already separate, and then we amicably separated and started Paducah Insurance in 2018. And so that
Wow.
was that actually allowed us. One of the reasons we did that is we wanted to get appointed with a company called Erie, who's a core
Yeah.
carrier for us, and they would not have appointed us. We were too big for them at Bradshaw and Will, the old agency. So I had Brandon as a partner in the church agency. We amicably separated the non-church stuff, which he owned. He was still a partner for a year in that, and then we eventually bought him out and merged with an agency in Knoxville. So I've had partners that I worked well with, and I've had partners that I haven't worked well with. And then Brandon, my first cousin, who was the one we separated from, I ended up getting back with him in January of this year. So last year,
Okay.
his home and auto customers, and then he came to work for me, which was his idea, as an employee, doing only financial planning in January of this year, and then we'll end up acquiring his financial planning firm and practice at the end of next year. So,
You've
you
been
know,
busy.
well, right, and some of
Yeah.
that wasn't my idea. Some of that was
Sure.
just, hey, I'm open. We've got the best market for home and auto, and y'all are struggling. We'll buy your customers, and then it was like, well, do we want to be in the same space? And it was an opportunity for us to, kind of get back together, and then he said, I'm just going to come over as an employee and give you this, and you don't even have to buy it. It's just going to be something I do for you, and I was like, all right, that'll work, So it's opened up us to be able to go into. We're planning on offering group benefits anyway, but now we're offering 401k as well because he's on board. So none of that was really things that I
Mm.
planned. If you'd have told me I was expecting to be his perpetuation at Bradshaw and Will, and would eventually have bought out that agency. If you'd have told me even in 2016 that any of this would have happened, I wouldn't have believed you. Like it just how it's gone down and fractured. So
That's amazing. So can you speak to how large Lightwell is?
yeah, so Lightwell of Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee, we're 3.5 to 4 million in revenue, depending on profit sharing.
Okay.
And then Paducah Insurance will be about 2.3, 2.4 this year. But keep in mind, in 2018, Paducah Insurance was 400,000 in revenue, so we've grown that much that fast. And then Lightwell in 2016 when
Awesome.
we started was 400,000 in revenue. So I mean, the businesses, like, things have just blown up. I mean, it's crazy how I mean, I wish I could be like, man, it's my pure business genius, that has done this, but it's just
It's
things have just
God.
worked out, and the
Yeah.
partners we've partnered with have been great partners, and some of that's acquisition, and I'm not a sole owner of any of it. So I mean, that's the
Hmm.
thing. I've been very quick to pull in partners, and that's allowed us to do more with more people because of that.
That's so cool. I love hearing it when favor happens in people's lives.
That is it. I pray for the good Lord's favor
Yeah.
every day, and,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we're not owed any of that.
That's right.
We're not owed any of it. We're not owed the ridiculous luxury we live in and any of that.
Hmm.
But you just try to do the right things and treat people properly and take care of your customers as best you can, and that's the rest of it. Just control what you can control. But there's no way we can take credit collectively for any of the positive. I mean, we've played a role, but there's no responsibility or credit for it sitting on anybody's shoulders
That's
other than the
amazing.
good Lord.
Yeah. So if you could give someone a piece of advice about owning a business, what would that be?
So I would say if you're ambitious and you want to own a business and be as big as you can be, the workflow piece of it is so critical.
Hmm.
Uh, and you most people get into a business and they scale up first and grow the revenue, and then realize that they need the systems in place to support it and manage it at that level. And
That's what we've done this last year. It's like, oh
y-
crap.
yeah. So
Yeah.
and that's it's success. And so then if
Hmm.
you do it that way, you've got the money in hand to go back
Hmm.
and build the systems to manage it, right?
Yep.
I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I started backwards. I ended up building a system and then scaling it up, and it's so
Hmm.
much easier when we've done all these acquisitions on the insurance agency side. Those were scaled up without the systems in place, and then to put them into our system. If we do it, if we grow organically, we're putting them in as we write them the first time, and it's all set up properly. But when they're on the books already and they're not in the system,
Hmm.
it's really hard to go do all that at once for a
Sure.
large book of business. But most people scale up first and then figure out the workflow. I would encourage as many people as possible. If you can figure out the workflow to scale it, and what do we do if we do this at high volume? How do we? But I don't know. You learn a lot of the lessons of how it needs to be done by scaling it improperly.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
if that's a word. So that's the balancing act. I would just say, either grow in a manageable pace, or be thinking about what that workflow looks like, and making sure you're identifying what data. It really all comes down to what information do you need on the customer to properly take care of them. For an insurance agency, that's different than for a construction business. But at some point, you sit down and you say, okay, if I want to show my insurance customer the limits on their policy, I got to put that somewhere and
Hmm.
track it, and then I can pull it into a proposal, or I can send it to the company, or I can make sure the company did what we asked them to when we sent the change into them, and it's like, well, I got to think through what that actual data needs to be. If I'm going to quote and do a takeoff and do a bid on a construction job, we got to know which pieces of information we have to have in order to do that bid. And in most industries, that lives in the owner's head, and they're the ones that know it. And it's like, well, why would I write that down and hand it to somebody else? I know what it needs to be. And it's like, well, we
Yep.
get that, but if you don't, it only gets as big as many things as you can handle. And at
That's
some
right.
point, you'll be pulling your hair out. And you're going to say it'd be easier for me just to sell this and walk away than it would be to keep doing it.
Yep.
And so that scalability and is all back on workflow, and it all falls back in data and systems. So
Yeah.
that
Well,
may be a hard answer to give somebody, but that would be it. Or be happy at a smaller revenue amount where you can have a good lifestyle and not go crazy.
sure. Yeah. It just depends on what you want. But that's really great advice.